Yo, what's up? Now, if I'm gonna be completely honest with you, man, yo, I was reading those patch notes and that, I'm not gonna lie, that was crazy. As a Bama enjoyer, I felt like I was running and I was just watching builds fall left and right and left and right, and surprisingly, by the time I made it to the end, we were still alive. We have a couple of bullet wounds and stuff because, you know, some of the nerfs caught us, but we're actually completely fine. We're still over 20 million damage, no problems, firm handshakes. Thank you for believing in Bama. Alright, this is the part where I try to make a couple more jokes and you make you chuckle, but truthfully, you have more build guides you need to watch, so I'm actually just going to get straight to it and get it over with. Now, if you have no idea what Bama means, then this probably looks like a weird thumbnail. Basically, this is a minion ability, and it means blink arrow, mirror arrow. We summon a minion, he copies our bow and our quiver, and all the damage on it. So if we have elemental damage, crit, and crit multi, then he will now do, well, all of that damage. And the minion himself shoots with rain of arrows, and those rain of arrows overlap and can hit 3 times per minion, and technically a little bit more, but more details on that obviously later on. We're just going to do a brief summary just to make sure that me and you are on the same page for this whole video. Now, if I was you, I'd be wondering, okay, what is this build good at and what is it bad at? I don't want to waste my time. So the worst part was T17s. That's kind of a blanket statement these days because I think every build besides like heavy mage blood or DD characters struggled with T17s. So sorry, bud, I really don't have much more info than that. The animate guardian kind of struggled, and when he would die, you'd lose about 40% of your damage, but they are nerfing T17s. You kind of see the problem. If T17s are fine and the AG survives, then T17s are, you know, they're more or less fine. But if the animate guardian is dying a lot, then it still can be pretty annoying. That being said, I did league start this last league and I did do 10 T17s pre-nerf, so they are definitely doable. They're just very tedious. The good news, every single piece of content I did before a T17, I blasted through with my eyes closed. I was basically not paying attention, and it was, you know, hardcore Necropolis, day 1 Necropolis when they were insane, and I was still completely fine. By the end of day 1, I was guardian farming and I was just making currency, and honestly, one of the best, smoothest league starters I've ever had in my entire time ever playing PoE. If I was going to give it a rating, I'd say 9 out of 10. If the T17 experience was a little bit better, I would set a 10 out of 10, but it is what it is. So if you're still intrigued, then we have to go on to the plan. Transfigured gems. Now the good news is that blink arrow and mirror arrow can be turned into one and another. There's going to be footage playing right now of how this works. You just take one, sell it to a vendor with an alteration orb, and you can turn blink arrow into mirror arrow, or mirror arrow into blink arrow, back and forth. Now you specifically want bombardment, you do not want prismatic. Bombardment is what we're going to use for our damage. The other good news is that this is the most common transfigured gem in the game now, because there's 2 versions, right? So by the time you hit Bloody Aqueducts, you'll probably have found 2 or 3C, and you can just buy Bama from somebody and you're good, big chillin'. Now to get to that point, I have a plan. You always got to have a plan, right? We're going to do magma orb, magma balls. Once you get to 28, we'll switch to Firestorm. From that point on, you'll eventually get to Bloody Aqueducts, switch to Bama, and that's it. That's the whole plan. Buy your Bama gem at that point, and don't look back. Hopefully you'd have fun. Now, obviously that's just a brief summary, and the POB, trust me, is going to be very detailed and over-explained, but at the very least you have an idea of what you're walking into now. The last thing I'll say is if you want to see my stream, you know, the Twitch is in the description. I'll probably be streaming every day. I mean, hey, look, it's my video. I'm going to plug myself, okay? All right, firm handshake. Let's get to the POB, and ideally, I will sell you on the rest of this build. Now, POB, I usually do this every single time we get to POB. I want to explain the numbers. This way, you know there is absolutely no pad here, and I'm actually underselling the damage because I like to go for averages rather than the best case scenario. Just like real life, there is no such thing as a perfect scenario, and PoE is definitely not an exception. So first things first, go over here, make sure it's always on Guardian Pinnacle. Maybe I was testing and I messed up, or maybe you're on looking at a POB after this one and it's kind of sus. So just make sure this is good to go. This is just a general tip for you if you forgot. Down here, look for pad and scroll to the bottom. In this case, I have the determination nerf simulated here, so do not touch this until POB is updated. Next is the Arena Master Spectre. This is supposed to be 20%, but I put it at 8% to simulate the buff time. His buff is 4 seconds long, and it's actually 20%, but it has an 8-second cooldown, so I just lowered the numbers down to this. Same thing with the Spectral Leader. It's 20%, not 10. It's very unlikely you're gonna have all 3 of your minions inside of it at once, so I usually assume that I'll get 2 in, and then he's gonna go run off punching a wall, and I'll just hate life for a little bit. These are your AG stats. These are 100% uptime as long as your AG actually is, you know, hitting something. Intimidate gloves, lightning exposure if you want to see his gear. It's over here in the item section. You can go and check it out if you want. There is no Kingmaker on the AG. I'll go ahead and address that now. No Kingmaker because I don't know if he's going to survive long enough. So I'd rather you not over invest. If you do want to, you can go Kingmaker and take the risk. But until I personally know that he's not dying anymore, I'd rather not recommend a bunch of people waste a lot of money. Now, Signal Prey is your backup plan if you're doing an Abomination map, for example, where you have to target the T17 boss. Otherwise, run Awakened Minion damage or normal Minion damage, and this is here just, as a reminder for Signal Prey. Feeding Frenzy is on our Spectre, Fresh Meat is on our main link, this is Adrenaline, gives a ton of crit, a ton of more damage, and then Meat Shield is on our AG, obviously, to keep him alive. These don't do anything, but I like check marks, so I turn them on. This doesn't matter, this is for our Jinx Juju. If you look at our effective HP, it goes down because it's 10% of the Spectre's life taken before ours. The good news is that it's capped by whatever our max hit would be, so if you just plug it in, it'll do the math for us, which is good because I'm terrible at math. This is the punishment curse, so this is if they're on low life, 50% or less, and I run it because the debilitated effect, 10% less damage if you've been hit recently by that boss. A good example of this is Shaper Balls. Shaper hits you with one ball, now the next ball is going to do 10% less damage as long as he was cursed with punishment. Good defensive layer. Most people think about it for the damage, but I run it because I think it's just a good mix between offense and defense. Now the enemy is blinded because I have a jewel specifically with 4% blind. And this is needed because it lowers their evasion, which means your minions have a higher chance to hit him. So think of this as technically better accuracy. Bama does have accuracy issues early on. Eventually it kind of evens out with the levels, but for now, I'd recommend you always just have a blind jewel. After that, it's pretty straightforward. We have shock. It really just depends on your content. If you're doing T16, this is definitely 20 or 25. If you're doing T17s, I put it to 8 because T17s, you know what I'm saying? These are from the AG's gloves because the on hit effect, and then intimidate is from the AG as well over down here. And we do not have 30 million damage. This is wrong. This is the higher damage version because I was going to showcase that if you're a softcore player, you can do more damage than me. The tankiness goes down significantly. So if you're going to be a hardcore player, we're going to go tankier. If you're a softcore player, this is the backup plan. A very, very, very end game expensive solution, but I know some people would want it because people asked for it last time. So I decided I would just go ahead and put it in here for you. Now, if you want the actual numbers, here they are. 21.2 million is my average DPS. We're actually going full tank, 31k, 86k, and make sure flasks are off if you want to see the non-mapping version. When you're fighting bosses, your flasks are not on, obviously. But when you're mapping, your flasks are pretty much on 90% of the time. So depends on your content, right? Fairly tanky for mapping. For bossing, yeah, it's a necro with armor stacking. There's only so far we can get it. Last thing I'd mention is note section. Boom. Many notes. AG gear, specters, locations, how to level with speedrunning and alternative levels, transfigured gem plans. Yeah, I mean, this took a while to write up and I'm really bad at, language, so it's kind of annoying, but I don't know. Color coding it was fun, I guess, so it's there if you need it. Speaking of color coding, I color code the endgame tree to match. So for example, endgame tree, if you wanted to go to, Bama switch, then it's yellow, and same thing over here with the skills. Speaking of the skills, we're gonna go ahead and switch to rolling magma now. So rolling magma, like I said earlier, nothing special here. I'm not gonna really talk about this. This is basic leveling. Firestorm is the easiest leveling that I've done in recent time. I loved it. It was really fun. I recommend you do it. 2 wands, 2 scepters. If you want to do the speedrun strat, then you would run this, and the note section explains how to do it. But if you're a casual player, normal player, geez, honestly, if I'm leveling this, I'm probably just gonna use 2 wands and 2 scepters too. The bottom right, you're seeing the leap slam speedrun, footage. It was fun. It was good. I liked it, but it was definitely a little bit much too squishy, and the damage kind of fell off by the time I reached BA. So I would advise you to just level with spiritual aid. Go ahead and get this fire mastery. You're good to go. Like I said earlier, our goal is to get to Bloody Aqueducts and eventually buy Bama. So this is your first step to doing that. Now you're switching to Bama at this point. I'm assuming you have to go down here and get your HP and your dex because we need this. This is the blink arrow CDR. By the time obviously you're in Bloody Aqueducts, you should be able to buy this, and you have to take this anoint. Without this, you just cannot cast Bama in any meaningful cooldown. So it's mandatory. It's really annoying, but it's mandatory, so you got to do it. Now Bama switch. Like I said before, make sure everything's lined up. So the yellow, and congratulations. Now we can actually start talking about Bama. Now I have to go in game in order to show you this. So we're going to use a tech. We don't run Divine Blessing, it's deleted, but we were going to do this anyway. So if you don't know, Guardian's Blessing is a way for your minion to support an aura. So in this case, we want haste because it's attack speed and it makes us run quicker. And we're going to attach that to blink arrow. You do not need a special blink arrow. You just need normal blink arrow. It's not a big deal. Attaching that with feeding frenzy to, get the feeding frenzy buff. It's, very simple. And here's what you do. We enter the map. You're going to summon your blink arrow. And our main attack is mirror arrow, right? So if we mirror arrow, we don't move. Blink arrow, we move. Now, you enter the map, you blink arrow, and just think of this like Divine Blessing. Turn on haste aura, mirror arrow, blink arrow. Mirror, blink, mirror, blink, mirror, blink. Now you see the aura is staying on because I am somewhat within the range of the last minion I summoned. This goes away if you run too far. So in this case, I'll just walk away and he despawns and I lose the haste aura and I gotta start over again. So it is very tedious to get used to, but as you can see, when you're blasting through T5, T6 maps, it's completely fine. And I imagine the footage on the bottom right is gonna be more of just, me doing this and like T8 maps testing awful gear. So really easy, really straightforward, get used to it. Do you have to run this? No, absolutely not. If you don't want to run this, you don't have to. Feel free to do whatever you want, or maybe, just do whatever you want. It's completely fine. But aside from that, the skills are very straightforward. There's really not much to say here. Spirit Offering because we're going crit, typical Molten Shell, Precision to get our accuracy and our crit up, and that's pretty much it. The order in which I would prefer to get the damage is this. Conk Effect last, because although it is the most damage, does make your AoE smaller, and I really, really doubt you need high, 6-link Conk Effect damage when you're doing a tier 4 map. So I'd prefer for you to have just a little bit more AoE and then get the Conk Effect last. Now, items, very, very simple. You're just getting lightning damage and then blank. Lightning fire, lightning cold, lightning percent, lightning minion damage. Very straightforward. Nothing special here. This gear is about 800,000 damage when you enter maps with this garbage, and an Elevore. This is just a really good suppression helmet. I recommend it highly. The rest of the gear is very straightforward. I always recommend Amethyst Ring, and you will have mana issues. So in that case, I recommend that you anoint Dreamer. This is really cheap. Even on day 1 in your first 3 hours of mapping, you can afford this. This gives you reduced mana cost and some mana regen. Worst case scenario, your mana is still kind of, bricked. Run an Enduring Mana Flask until you eventually fix it, or, you find the non-channeling. I did try to make this work without having to have the Elrion rings and just going over here and getting this. But if your mana is still kind of bricked, maybe you take the reduced mana cost. And ideally that should be it. Worst case scenario, if you really don't want to use an Enduring Mana Flask, you can take this. Really not a big deal. Your damage should carry you. Now, like I said before, go into the mid-tier gear, make sure your skills are lined up, and we're good to go. There's really not much that changes in the skills anymore. Basically, the concept is we're just going to add one more roll, right? So before, we had lightning and cold. Now, make it go higher. We're going to go tier 4 lightning and cold, then tier 3 lightning and cold, and now we're going to add crit strike chance. Same thing with the Quiver, right? The Quiver had lightning damage and just a crafted attack speed. Now let's get a little bit more health. Try to get crit multi if we can, or crit strike chance. And that's just the same concept here of all this stuff. Your goal at this point is to go for suppression cap. So we have like 10% suppression. Our chest piece doesn't have suppression. I would prefer for you to just get high armor, big fizz DR. Determination obviously was nerfed, but how else are we going to get armor besides getting determination aura effects? So kind of one of those, like, it is what it is. Obviously, maybe 3 weeks from now, I would change this, but for now, we're getting a ton of suppression from Mage Vein, the evasion mastery. So make sure everything has, evasion, even if it doesn't have armor. Make sure it has evasion, so you get that 15%. This is really important. I was watching a stream and apparently people don't take this that often. So yeah, this is your PSA. This is insane. This 15% suppression for just wearing good bases. Now, the end game gear. This is where we have to talk. So I'm actually going to start on the tree first. So we're doing nothing special here. Energized armor. We're going ahead and getting this to make sure that we have enough mana. At this point, you're going to have to more or less follow all of my gear 1-to-1 if you want to simulate what I did. There's always a way around it. If you're having trouble with, suppression, you just go ahead and take these wheels. It's not a big deal. Your Glorious Vanity, I'm going to assume you know how a Glorious Vanity works. So, right here, I'm getting armor and fizz damage reduction. That's always the best defensive. But you could also get suppression and res here, just like this. 6% suppression, 8% res. You'd be able to, drop maybe like these 2 life wheels. Get this. For 1 point, you can get that. These are always an option. There are tattoos that exist. These actually shouldn't be here. they're not needed, but they're left over. But tattoos will exist, so maybe you get 2% suppression, you know, in various areas, or you get res. Always tons of options. I try to just, you know, try to make it not too expensive, but it is what it is. This gear is probably supposed to get you through a T17, so it's got to be good to do it. Outside of that, you know, just fractured jewels, very straightforward. You craft them with blue harvest juice, and you're very much just looking for lightning. So blue harvest juice, lightning. It takes about 10,000 for you to find your first % minion damage, and then, you know, hopefully you get a useful stuff. Pretty much it. Very straightforward. Now, the reason why I was avoiding talking about the gear is because I'm actually going to do a brief explanation on how I crafted this gear. Everything here is fractured. Everything here has 14% suppression, and everything here was very expensive to make. That's why I named this expensive. Now, obviously there's no mage blood here, but this is pretty hard to make. So I'm going to give you a very just quick brief how to craft this on Craft of Exile. I don't have the materials in game, so we're just going to use Craft of Exile to do this. Now, ideally, you would find an ivory bow or something with a less dex requirement. A spine bow has a very high dex requirement. Ivory or spine are the best crit bases. We pick hatred or fire, and you pretty much just roll this. And ideally, you're just going to look for like tier 2 fire. Tier 3 if you're, you know, a little broke, or you get lucky rolls. But ideally, we're looking for at the very least, well, something like that could work. But let's just go for the fire to make it clean. All right, here we go. Tier 2 fire damage. Let's say that you say this is good enough. I'd say it takes on average about 80 to 100 essences to hit tier 2/tier 1. So very expensive, very good money sink. This has an open suffix. So if this didn't have an open suffix, you know, and it was full, you have no choice. You have to annul and hopefully you get lucky. In this case, obviously we got lucky. So the next step is pretty straightforward. Go here, prefixes cannot be changed. This is 2 divines. You scour it. Clings the suffixes, and now you multiple. So it can't have multiple. This is another 2 div, and now you put attack speed right here. Minion attack speed is slightly better than base attack speed because, well, the number's higher for minions, obviously. And then you craft crit. If you need strength or dex or whatever, you can use a different one, but this is ideally it, and here you go. This is basically my bow, but with tier 2 fire. This may cost about 15 div if you want an idea, but if it's league start, genuinely, I have no idea how much it's going to cost. Just assume it's going to be expensive, to be honest. Now, the quiver is very much deterministic. It is expensive, though. You need a fracture of one of the 3, crit multi, crit strike chance, or attack speed. And then the bow, not the bow, the quiver is deterministic. Now, because we have one of the 3 fractured, we're just looking for one more. So now we're looking for crit strike chance or crit multi in this case. The prefixes do not matter. You don't care about life, you don't care about % damage, none of that. You don't give a crap about any of that stuff. All we want is high crit strike chance or high crit multi. Ideally, we find one by itself and we don't have to annul, but let's see what happens. All right, for the sake of time, because it's 9:40 a.m. and I want to just get this video out, let's assume you're happy with this. It has dex on it. That's unfortunate. There's no plan here. There's nothing you do. You just annul. In this case, we hit it. If you obviously, you know, remove the crit or remove the lightning, you gotta start over. But in this case, we hit it, so we're happy. The quiver is essentially done at this point. You're thinking right now, what do you mean it's done? There's nothing on this quiver, Waff. Are you stupid? The answer to that is yes. And second of all, that's rude of you to think. Don't say that. That's mean. I have feelings. So now you do cannot roll attack modifiers. Very simple plan here if you've done this before, but if you don't, because it cannot roll attack modifiers, well, this has an attack modifier and this has an attack modifier, which means if you annul, you will only remove the enchant in this theory, right? Well, I guess not theory, this is actually just fact. So we exalt, but you can only exalt 2 things on the prefix, life and % damage. And let's say you're happy with this, the bow is done. If you're not happy with this, well, this is where it's a money sink. I think it's 1 div per attack roll here, so we annul. Okay, we try again, and we got that sucks, we want better. We annul, remove the life, that's fine. Kept it alive, slam, that's bad. And, you know, let's say, you know, we annulled, you have to do it all over again. And now you gotta, you know, spend another divine, and then you go here and you exalt it, and you do this, and, you know, it sucks. So you literally just repeat this over and over and over and over again until you finally get what you're looking for. So this is really just more about, you know, how much money do you want to spend? And then you can just, you know, pause this project, come back to it later, and then you just craft crit strike chance. I don't know. You just craft a crit strike chance and you have a quiver that looks just like this, and there you go. That's how you do it. Money sink, but deterministic. The good news is I don't have to do any guides for the rest of this stuff because it's YOLO. It's literally just spam essences and get 14% fractures. It it is what it is. I tried to find other ways to do it, but if you want to min-max it for defense and still, you know, saving your skill points, 14% fractures is the best way I've seen how to do it. Nothing special though. Craft this one with dex essences because you really need the dex and the res. This one is just whatever you got, life, lightning res. I haven't mentioned this, but obviously we're going to have way higher life rolls this league, but I'm not simulating that. Who knows, you know, what our gear is going to look like, so I'd rather just keep it on the low end. But obviously in theory, we would have 5,800 HP just from the fact of having new bases, but I don't know that for a fact, so I'm not going to assume. Boots are pretty bad, but you know, straightforward. There we go. Rings, bound fossil. That's pretty much the easiest way to craft this ring, is just a bound fossil. You can also use blue caster harvest juice. Usually that's the next cheapest, but it's a money sink. Bound fossil, blue harvest juice, casting. That'll target the minion attack speed, and then you just spam it over and over again until you find the damage. You do need an open prefix. That non-channeling is not negotiable. You need it. Sorry, you need it. Same thing here, but this one's more res based. You can skip the minion damage, you know, on these. You don't have to have it perfect, but if you want to see what my endgame gear pretty much looked like, well, this is what it looked like. And then the jewels, like I said before, blue lightning harvest juice to get these. The Watcher's Eye is a generic flat armor determination. Fizz damage reduction determination is not that good. And then they removed the conversion, so we don't have to think anymore. We just get the flat armor and we're happy. There's nothing else that affects minions, so really not much we could do. One thing you could do on a cheaper end, but people really like it, is chaos resistance for the purity of elements, because we are running purity of elements. I find that to be more expensive in softcore than even this would be, so maybe not a plan. And ideally, I did everything right this time. I definitely did not re-record this for no particular reason. That did not happen. And you should have the ideas to get, you know, more damage, be tanky, have a good league start. Hopefully the league is good. And like I said before, I'll be streaming every single day. I mean, literally right after I upload this video, I'm probably going to bed, eating, waking up, and streaming my next plan for my next build guide, and we continue the cycle. That's me. Have a good one. Ideally, a good league start. Good luck, bud. Hopefully this one's good.